LeeAllen Dickson, 11/11/37. SEALs never came into existence in about October of '62. Well, my dad got killed in a hunting accident in 1939 when I was 2 years old. So my mother and my uncle, my mother was a Friedline, and my uncle Paul Friedline, and my dad had run owned a cabins, fishing camp with cabins and boats and things like that. So she went on to manage that, and my uncle owned it, and she managed it, and we lived there in the summertime. I had a great life growing up there because we got to swim and really at a fish camp or at a place like that. It was great. And then in the wintertime, about this time of the year, right after duck season, we would move to town. We had this big rock house in town that we lived in that my mother owned. It was my granddad's house, it had been. And we spent the winters there. And so we lived in there, and we always rented rooms because money was very tight. We always rented rooms to different people. We took in boarders and things like that to make ends meet. But it was great growing up because we'd all get together and play board games and things, cards and things like that. I joined after high school. I spent a short period of time thinking I wanted to be a farmer, but that was short-lived. So then a friend of mine and I were going to join on the buddy system. You used to have a buddy system where your buddy could go with you through boot camp and everything. Well, the day the recruiter was going to take us down to Des Moines to be inducted, Pete didn't show up. After boot camp, I got aboard a carrier, and that was quite an experience. I had never been much out of Guttenberg or anywhere, and I got checked aboard that carrier at dark. And on the pier, you could look up, and as far as you could see any direction, it was steel. First started out, they needed a yeoman, somebody that could type. And it beat doing anything else that was available, so I said I would do that for a while on a temporary basis. And I got to know my way around the ship a little bit. And I was an engineer, and they were hurting for engineers down in the fire rooms, and I didn't want to go down to the fire rooms. But in the B division, they had the evaporators in there, down in where you made the water. So that's what I did for 3 years on there, is made water. And it was a great, nice, clean, cool job. No heat in the fire room and stuff. We had to put it out of commission in Bayonne, New Jersey when I still had about a year left in the Navy after we got it decommissioned. I liked that because, well, we got to go to a lot of strange foreign ports. Havana, Cuba was probably the best place I ever went. That was a beautiful place, beautiful country. And then Barcelona, Spain, and life aboard a destroyer was not too it wasn't too enthused to staying in the Navy after that, so I got out. Had a Cadillac convertible and didn't have to worry about money because I was single. I'd work whenever I felt like it and party when I felt like it. So I stayed out for till December of '63. It finally dawned on me that I couldn't continue doing this for the rest of my life. This wasn't going to last, so if I wanted to settle down and do anything, I'd better go back in the Navy. And that was about the time, Vietnam was you were starting to hear some noise about Vietnam and stuff like that. And I thought, well, that'd be more exciting than being around here. So I went back in and I tried going into the submarine force and found out I was too old.
Oh.
At 26, you're too old.
Really?
Yeah. So then a friend of mine from here in town worked at the personnel office in the Pentagon, and he knew I got it. It was at the station there, so he called me up and said, "Come on over, and we'll fix you up with wherever you want to go." So I went over and we tried everything. We tried that, submarines, that didn't work. Couldn't get into anything else. Ended up on another destroyer out on the west, but I went to the west coast anyhow this time. And I just didn't want to be on a destroyer, so I tried to get off. But it was a new destroyer, and since it was new construction, you couldn't get off without the first year of being aboard a year. So I said, well, I'll go to EOD school or something like that. So I put in for EOD school, and this first class radio man come down and he said, the only way you can get off of here, the only way you can break it is go to UDT training. Go
What's
to
UDT?
Underwater Demolition Team, because they're the only ones that had any priority. And that was the forerunner of SEAL Team anyhow. You had to be in UDT before you could get into SEAL Team. So him and I went to training. I finally got off there to go to training. He was a young guy, big strapping guy, looked like the picture you would expect a frogman to be, So we there about the third night of Hell Week he came to me and he says, we got to quit. They're going to hurt us. I said, no, man, we put up too much into this to quit. Hell Week is a week, about the fourth week you're in training. You spend a whole week awake. And we started out with about 110 guys in the class, and I think it was 23 of us. I got a picture of it in here somewhere. 23 of us made it. Training only lasted about 6 months or so, 6, 7 months. But you're always in training, so it was. Once you found out there was such a thing as SEAL Team, the way to get into it was you had to have a year in UDT and made a successful trip to Vietnam or to overseas with UDT, and then you were able to write a letter saying why you wanted to go to SEAL Team, and then they voted on it. There was only 50 guys on each coast. I did all right. I mean, as good as could be expected. I mean, you go for a whole week with no sleep and just harassed and run and just kept busy all the time, doing log PT and running in the surf and boating and, just so let you know that you could be up against something like this someday. And everything they did during training over the next 20 years or so, or 15 years that I was in there, you could always relate back to it reflected something in training, like you had going through the swamp in the mud. They had the mud flats in Hell Week where you just played in the mud all day. You had a big old swampy mud place, and being cold a lot, diving through the ice, under the ice. Winter warfare school, I went to Italian winter warfare school. Like I said, SEAL Team was a continuous training. You're always training. Either you were operating someplace or you were training someplace. Well, I went to SEAL Team, I went to UDT 12 first, for the 6 months or so. And then I went to SEAL Team 1, and somewhere in here there's a list of everything I did all the way through. I mean, I was the ordnance petty officer and so on and so forth, all the way up to being advisor to the paramilitary force in Vietnam. And we made the first landing that the Marines made since Korea.
And where was that?
That was in Da Nang. We surveyed the beach, and then the day of their landing, we went in first and set up the perimeters on the beach. We were all hyped up, so the Marines thought this was a real deal, you know. And first thing you know, it got light enough I could see people moving around on the beach, you know. And I radioed back out, and I said, "Hey, there's movement on the beach here, you know. This ain't going to be good, you know." And then it finally got light enough, and it was the news media.
Were they Vietnam or American?
Americans, ABC, NBC, the whole 9 yards. It was super secret. None of us knew anything about it, but the news media knew everything about it. Our officer in charge was in the center of the beach, and he called back out to the ships and tried to get a hold of the Marines and say, "Hey, there's friendlies on the beach." I did a lot of parachuting. Even that one first trip to Na Bay or to Mike up in Da Nang, I was self-taught. We decided we were all jump qualified, but we wanted to be free fall qualified. So we taught ourselves how to free fall. I did shoot a gun out of a guy's hand one time. As we started, I was a point man, and as we started in there, we started seeing cuttings where they'd been cutting nipapalm to make their hooches and stuff out of. So we knew we were getting close, and all of a sudden we found this huge big rice cache and a big building of it. As we came up on it, I noticed that there was a set of tracks running out of there, and he was standing right there in among some trees. He started to bring his gun up, and I was already expecting somebody to come or to see somebody, and luckily the first round it knocked the gun out of his hand. I had a Swedish K with a silencer on it, and I ended up with a shot of half a magazine, 15 rounds at him. And let's see, and one day I got missed by a sniper. He'd been hitting people at 400 yards, pretty regular. And I'd shot this guy when I was on the mountain. I'd shot this guy, and then I'd tried to get into this, go down, and when I was going down to pick him up, well, he'd been an MVA, and I wanted a souvenir, is about what it amounted to. Something you're always told never to do. Anyhow, I went back down, and then I saw this other cave mouth down there. And I thought, well, I'll just go see what's over there, go in there. And going down there, I was really intense on the cave mouth, thinking if there's any. Well, I walked right by a VC, and all of a sudden I heard this shot behind me. And I turned just to see him falling off of the cliff, an NVA guy falling off the cliff. My interpreter behind me had shot him because he was smart enough to look around. And I laughed. "Coban, be careful." Anyhow, another intervention. And one day I survived 4 grenades going off from me, less than 10 feet. One of them was a U.S. M26 grenade that one of my own guys had thrown. SEAL team was the best life in the world. I mean, it was something exciting to do every day, and you never knew how long you were going to do it.